Hello and welcome to the Wittmer Rejuvenation Clinic testimonials with some of our clients. Today we have Shelley H-Wells joining us from the Houston, Texas area, technically Katy, I believe. And we're really excited to have you on today. We've had some males on, and so it's really exciting to get a female on here. Thank you for joining us, Shelley.
You're welcome. Great to be here.
Awesome. Well, we'd like to kind of get the party started here with just getting to know a little bit about you and what you're currently doing as far as your job and your lifestyle and things like that. So please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name's Shelley. My husband and I are both Starting Strength coaches. We are in Houston right now running Starting Strength Houston and Starting Strength Katy. We've been working with Starting Strength for a little over 10 years now, and we've been coaching for about 15 years. So it's a lifestyle, being healthy, feeling good and being strong. Almost 3-year-old son. And, he's, as far as starting with this, he was a big part of, the pregnancy and postpartum with me finding, hormone replacement therapy. And my husband himself, he's been on hormone replacement therapy for quite a few years. And then when Dr. Wittmer and them had the ability to work with us down here, out of state, he made a pretty quick change over to you guys, just because of, financially, it was a little bit more affordable and just easier, having the ability to do it via distance, have everything do. Not having to go in once a week in person just for your shot was a huge improvement for him and just a lot more inconvenient. And and he got me on it or in contact with Dr. Wittmer after having Jameson.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk a little bit about like the husband and wife and how that dialect works between the two of you guys. I think that's really cool that one, your husband was able to find the Wittmer Rejuvenation Clinic and see that it was a better option for him. You mentioned some of the price point and just the simplicity of it being telemed. I think those are things that can be slightly overlooked at times of how easy it really truly is to get this stuff done. Obviously with your blood work, you're able to do that, at a local clinic there that's able to draw your blood. So then the doctors are able to look at your blood work. And then, like you said, your prescriptions are shipped right to your house. You mentioned that was a big turning point for you personally and your husband as you guys kind of matured into the fitness space and things like that. Tell us a little bit more. You mentioned before our call that the pre and postpartum side, you just weren't quite feeling right. Can you tap in a little bit more about what was going on there after you had your son?
Yeah. So looking back after I found out, I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's after having the baby, just because I knew something was wrong and I was really pushing for blood work. Looking back, I can see there have been symptoms there on and off for years, but I always train. Training's not an option to not train. You don't feel good, you still go train. I'm tired today, I just a little more caffeine or whatever, or take a day off and adjust programming or whatever. And looking back, I have gone to the doctor twice, about 8 or 10 years ago, just didn't feel right and asked for blood work. And, they get back, they're like, everything looks fine. At the time, I didn't know enough to be like, let me see those numbers, and actually, because it happens all the time. Everybody's like, the doctor says everything was fine. When, it may not be. There could be something that, just because you're within those ranges that they're looking at or something slightly out, it's not necessarily, they don't see this red light going off as, something's wrong. I've been training for a long time. I've been coaching for a long time. I understand recovery. I know what recovery is and what it isn't. Postpartum, it was, I gave the time of, you're breastfeeding and there's times where, yes, you're going to feel good. Recovery is going to be tough because of breastfeeding and give your hormones to regulate and blah, 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 all of that. But at 6 to 8 months postpartum, I wasn't feeling any better. I was actually starting to feel, I was no longer breastfeeding at that time. I actually struggled. I never produced enough milk to fully breastfeed only. We always had to supplement, and I dried up at about 5.5 months completely. Whether it has to do with my hormones, I don't know, or it just wasn't something that I was able to do. So I called my LB to go in at about 8 months postpartum. I was talking with my husband and was like, I definitely don't feel good. I can go and train very, very light workout and 4 or 5 days of recovery, like soreness, achy joints. I feel terrible. I'm not overweight. I was already at my pre-pregnancy body weight, but like my body wasn't what it should be and what it could be. And so I was getting discouraged with that, but just the inability to like go for a walk, like I just hurt. I'd wake up and just hurt all the time. No motivation, brain fog. Was trying to get back to work and just couldn't focus. I would just literally stare at the computer and like nothing would happen for 45 minutes, and for no reason. I was like, I just focused, and it's hard to explain brain fog unless you experience it. Like, it's just like, I don't know, you just can't focus on anything, nothing happens. So I went to the doctor, they ran blood work. My thyroid levels were just, all over the place. My TSH was super high. She sent back for T3, T4. She said those looked fine. So you're good. So 2 weeks later, I called my just another doctor. That was my OB that on my way, and they sent for further blood work. And that was where we went getting into test further in for the Hashimoto's to kind of see. I was like, if my TSH is that high, I don't feel good, I have all these symptoms. That's when I was like, maybe there is a thyroid issue. She did more blood work. And again, she was like, well, she was too afraid to treat it, because they're, yes, these levels are here, but she's like, if we put you on meds, then you're going to be too low and that's dangerous, if it gets you into to the hyperthyroid. And again, like, I'm not obese, not overweight, I look healthy, everything else looks fine. So they're like, you're okay.
Yeah.
I'm like, but I'm not. So she said to come back in 6 months and we'll look at it again. That was my breaking point. And that just happened to coincide, excuse me, my husband that was about the time that Dr. Wittmer, they were starting to expand and treat outside of their home state. And I think 2 days later, I was just kind of listening in on my husband was doing a call with Dr. Wittmer. They were chatting and, talking about weightlifting stuff and all that stuff. And they had somehow gotten into treating women. And I was like, hey,
that's me, right?
Yeah, like,
and that's what's so cool about this conversation. It's one thing I've been mentioned in some of those other interviews. There is a stigma around it, even for males, but let alone females. That's a whole nother conversation, right? And with some of the experiences you personally had with your thyroid issues, and then things like your pre and postpartum, all that stuff, it all comes into play. And your guys' hormones are at a completely different level than ours. Yeah. And if you're not getting the proper treatment, like you said, it can really mess you up. So did you have any hard times as far as the stigma around starting your prescription at all?
Me personally, no. Like, I was give me whatever you want, whatever you can, make me feel better.
Yeah.
And so I talked to, and I kind of butted in on their conversation and immediately set up a call with Dr. Wittmer. I just had blood work done, so he was like, just send it to me, and he took a look at it and he was like, well, no shit, you feel terrible. Look at all this, like, my testosterone didn't even register. It just said less than 12, pretty bad. For like, so I could feel better, and looking at my, T3, T4, and he just really, looked at that, but also just was like, tell me how you feel. Let's go through all your symptoms. And he's like, I literally had every single symptom of low T and, hypothyroidism, and then he goes by, he actually cared, the other doctors didn't really care. And I'm like, I don't feel good. They're like, oh, it's just postpartum. It takes time. I'm like, at this point, it's almost a year postpartum. I'm like, things should be getting better. Like, at least a little bit better. I'm being patient, but like I've, been patient long enough. So he sent in prescriptions. I think within like a week, I had, the testosterone at the time we were doing the testosterone cream and the thyroid meds. And from there, it was slow. I think my husband probably noticed the change before I did. I was finally like, not in my robe all day long. At the time I was working from home with the kid and, I started having a little bit more motivation. So we had a garage gym. So going out to the garage and training, and very slowly training got better. Recovery got better. Went from, maybe doing something twice a week to being able to have, 3 good solid training sessions with, some off day stuff. And then my body started, I don't eat shit, I eat well, and my body started responding to the nutrition, pretty quickly, losing a little bit of body fat that I had. And I've got pictures that I've taken along the way, and people are like, we didn't look terrible beforehand, but, like I had lost a significant amount of muscle throughout the pregnancy and postpartum. I mean, that's a year of not really, I've trained for my entire life, and a year of not really training much. I lost a lot of muscle mass, and it took about 8 months or so to kind of get back to a good solid, like, I feel good about myself. I look good. And since then, like even looking at pictures and how I feel, like how I look now compared to how I looked in the past, this is prior to having a baby, I look the same, if not better, for a lot less work.
Yeah. And you hopefully feel better too as well, right?
Yeah, much more. And if anything, I'll say much more stable. There's times when I feel okay, and then there's just like drop it, and it's just this kind of yo-yo of, and adjusting training and, stuff like that. And now like I 3 days a week, I maybe 45 minutes to an hour. I don't have a lot of time with the kid. I don't need to do anymore. It's kind of nice. I've got more time with him. Like my body fat stays really consistent. I don't track every single calorie I'm eating. Like I know roughly, what I'm eating. I don't eat a lot of junk and stuff, but like I can eat some goldfish or some chips with him. My body weight doesn't change. I've maintained a more consistent lean body mass since having my hormones, leveled and regulated than my entire life, honest, which is great. It feels great.
Yeah.
I've done some bodybuilding stuff in the past and dieted. I can look at pictures where I was training 6 to 7 days a week, hours and hours and hours, training and cardio, counting every single rice kernel and broccoli. And I'm leaner now than I was then without doing all that work, which is pretty like exciting for me. So I'm like, sweet, get a lot less,
Right.
and look good and feel good.
Right. Right. That's super cool. And what I'm curious now about then is, you mentioned you guys are working there at the Starting Strength gym, and you guys have clients and stuff there. How do you navigate those conversations with the female athletes as far as even potentially getting their blood work done or moving forward into a prescription phase?
Yeah. So with a client, obviously it's not a day one conversation. It's, they come in, they start training. If a woman has had a baby, I'll, just say of like, pay attention to start making notes about how you feel, because that's really, I'm a data person, like, write it down. So I literally will take, my training log to the doctor and I'm like, this doesn't make sense, and they don't get it. They think I'm just a nutcase. But with clients, it's watching, men and women, it's training and then just kind of watching the recovery rates. First we address sleep, nutrition, basic things, make sure that's in line. And then if they get to a point where they're just still not feeling good or not recovering, moods are all over the place. We don't really get into like sex drive and stuff in the gym, depending on like, the relationship with them, but that can be, something too, if they're comfortable, if they start talking about that. And then we kind of not get into the, well, why don't you go get some blood work done? And if anything, I'm never pushy on it. It's always good to just get a baseline, see where you're at, whether you go Dr. Wittmer or somebody else. It's, wherever you go, just get blood work, but you have to ask for some specific markers. Most doctors aren't going to look at your testosterone. They're not going to necessarily look at the detailed blood work that Dr. Wittmer does. Like when we go, it's funny because they'll often be like taking their like, Jesus, like you're getting so much blood work done. Like he looks at everything. And as I'm getting, I'm 41 now. It's the first time in my life that, like I can, like, it's nice to just have consistent blood work done because you just never know. I mean, my stuff looks good, but my husband, he's got really general, good markers too, but he's got a few diabetes runs in his family, fatty liver, there's something, and it's good for him to just continuously see that because, it keeps him on track a little bit more with, diet and exercise and stuff, but just, you can catch that stuff early. And that's, what we see with clients. Just training alone, we'll see people that, come off certain medications and they might be pre-diabetic but are no longer diabetic, and then go into, well, let's really start treating the hormones if necessary. And we have a lot of clients that have, and I mean, we can see it. It sometimes takes them a little while, but I'm like, you're feeling good.
Yep.
Or
yeah, and that starts reflecting in other areas. You mentioned, I was kind of the same way. So me and my wife have been in the fitness space as well for like a really, really long time. And I kind of got to the point similar to your experience where like I would work out, but I'd be so sore and so wrecked. And I'm only 30. I just turned 36 last week, but it was like, what's going on? Is this really how the rest of my life's going to be? I was able to train at such a high level for so long. And I think for my wife, even, we talk on here a lot about that conversation, husband and wife, and how sometimes it's a hard one, right? But as I laid it out to my wife, as far as, she could see the way I was feeling, right? And she could see how I was interacting with her, interacting with the kids. And so once I told her about the benefits of what could potentially happen, and, once I did get my blood work done, and then even the peace of mind of like, okay, now I know where I'm at and potentially what I need to fix to feel better. And, now I'm about 6 months in, and as you mentioned, my wife can see it. I am more motivated to go to the gym. I am more motivated to go outdoors with the kids and play around and do more stuff like that. And so I would love for you to just to tap in a little bit more as far as how the benefits of getting your blood work done, getting on a prescription has helped even just your marriage.
Oh, my husband and I, we always say if it weren't for him getting hormone therapy many years ago, we would probably not be married. Actually, I know we would not be married. And he's got interest. His started I can't think how many years ago, probably, 15 plus years ago. He was a competitive weightlifter for, years, trained heavily for many years. And he had a lot of, like, we've known each other since high school, and had I known him prior to him having these issues, like I would have probably not, stayed in contact with him because he was just it was just a roller coaster up one day, down one day, a bipolar type, almost behavior of happy one day, sad the next. Training, he started putting on body fat, knowing he was training heavy, just belly fat, not feeling good. And he says it was the light went off. We were at Wichita Falls Athletic Club, and he went and did like a real heavy snatch, and he hadn't hit it in a while. And it took him like 2 weeks to recover from the snatch. But if anybody knows a little bit, like it's heavy, but it's still submax. It's not going to take you 2 weeks to recover from, a heavy snatch. It should not. And at that time, when he went to the doctor and they tried to put him on antidepressants. And this was quite a few years ago when the hormone, I think there was maybe one kind of coming up in Wichita Falls. You didn't really hear about hormone therapy clinics at the time. And we were like, no. So we went and talked to Rip, Mark Rippetoe at the gym, and we he started looking at the testosterone, and we pulled it all up, and he had every single symptom. And so he had to go a little bit further out where there was a clinic there, but it was just not, that was the time it was kind of the stigma around it. People were thinking of it as like, you're getting on steroids type stuff, not hormone. But he'll describe his, like, once we got on hormone therapy for that, just the testosterone at the time, that he just woke up one day and the grass was greener, the sun was bright, and he just finally started feeling good. And that's, we started doing a lot better at that time. and now, and it's even better now with Dr. Wittmer because he checks it more often. But also there was a few months back where he was just getting moody. I was like, there is something like going on. I'm like, call Dr. Wittmer, and he sent him for blood work. Sure enough, they just need to make an adjustment in his dosage. And it's sometimes hard for the person to realize that. It kind of sneaks up. I think even we've had to make a few adjustments with my thyroid, and it's kind of like, the getting tired just kind of like sneaks up. You don't realize it. I'm like, I'll just go get another cup of coffee or, go grab an energy drink. And then I'm like, wait a minute, something's going on, and we'll go, I'll call him up. And he's like, let's go get it checked, and sure enough, we need to make a little adjustment to it. And it's not always just numbers necessarily, but, so it has really saved our relationship, saved our marriage, and the ability to like, be like, something doesn't feel right, and be able to call him and be like, hey, I feel a little off, he listens, and he's like, well, let's make an adjustment. Let's fix that. Right. And it always works.
Yeah. And we do talk obviously about the libido side of things and how it helps the physical attraction part, but also I think, the mental and spiritual aspects of a relationship too, because they do have more energy. As husbands, we are more tapped in, we're more excited about, like you said, the grass is greener and the sun is brighter. And I think that's a great point that you made there. Kind of to wrap this thing up and take it full circle, looking forward now into your lifestyle and how you've currently been feeling. You alluded to it just a moment ago. What are some of the benefits of working with the clinic and the ability to adapt your prescriptions and then adapt your lifestyle and training on top of that to really reach your goals? What kind of conversations and benefits have you seen working alongside the clinic?
Oh, I mean, well, it's everything. It's kind of like, we talk, Josh and I, it's kind of like, just like starting strength and strength training is part of our life. Like this is, we've become pretty passionate about just educating people on this because there's so little education out there. People get so used to going to the doctor and again, being told they're okay when they're not, and after being told that a couple of times, they're like, I don't know what to do, and they just get used to feeling like shit. And this for men and women, and as we walk around like zombies, or they want to medicate with, other, it's not, let's treat a symptom, not the cause. And that's, kind of, or they just don't listen. They tell you you're okay, whether you say you're not okay, and they tell you are. With you guys, it's, like I always feel heard. It's and constantly, like I've gotten to a point now where like I can kind of tell if my, especially with thyroid, because it's kind of always, up and down, up and down. I can tell when it's a little bit up. I can tell when it's, Dr. Wittmer is always right there. I can shoot an email or we can send in a comment or a message or a question. I mean, it's almost immediately answered, and it's great to feel cared for, taken care of. All of that were before, that I wasn't. There's so many people that aren't. It makes me sad. Honestly, with, how few people were able to get this help. We have all this expensive insurance and it does nothing. Like, besides give me some cold meds, but it's, it's less about the preventative, it's let's feel good so that we can exercise, get out for a walk and do things. I think of so many people that have trouble. I mean, even I was there, trouble getting out of bed in the morning. You don't want to get out, I got to go take care of a kid, but I would be completely happy laying in bed, not going outside, not doing anything. And it's not a way to live life. Putting me on antidepressants is not going to fix it. It was not postpartum depression. I can't tell me people were like, it's just the baby blues. I was like, no, like, I'm not depressed. I was like, I just feel terrible. I want to feel good. And like, now I do. And it's, and it's steady, which is great. And I'm not on any antidepressants. I'm not on anything, I'm healthy. And it's just, just looking at your hormones are so important. I think it's been overlooked too much, but men and specifically for women, I think, because I don't know that all of them realize that the help is out there for it because it's so much advertised towards the men's side of it.
Yep. Yeah. So the last question I'm going to ask you, are kind of just already starting to answer it even before I ask, but if a woman is experiencing a lot of the same symptoms you are having, what's kind of your encouragement or your words of advice for those women that potentially maybe have stigma around getting their blood work done or even taking specific prescriptions and things like that? What's kind of your final send off as far as the confidence you have in those things that you've?
Oh gosh, I think it's just education, really. I mean, for anything what we do, I always go back to just educating people, consulting on that side of it, showing the data. Yes, there's data and stuff like that, but, understanding that this is not a, I want to be big and muscular and, I personally, yes, want to be, but, but this is, let's feel good. Let's, get up and be happy to take care of your kids, be comfortable in your own skin. And training wise, it's, I go to people that have, there's a lot of them out there, and I've been there before, of just going and going and going and just never getting anywhere, never reaching that goal. They want to lose weight, they want to get stronger, whatever, and they go to the gym or go to this, and they're just kind of in this like never ending cycle or circle of just never getting where they want to get. And it's always going to come down to something, with, blood work, of course, diet, nutrition, and sleep, and, that's all. But, if your hormones are off, you're not sleeping. It's, there's so many things that it just trickles down to all those other stuff. And just, as I say, just see where you're at. Some people go, you may not need anything. I mean, who knows? But, see where it's at, get a baseline, especially even for men that are like, oh, they're like, maybe, I might need it in a couple of years. I'm like, well, go see where you're at, because that's going to at least give you something to look back at later on if it has dropped, or, you don't know, because some people feel good at this number. Some people feel good at this number. We're all different. Nobody's blood work's can look the same, just like training. Your squat's going to look different than my squat. We're not the same biomechanical system, so yeah, I'm kind of just dancing around the question. It's hard to, explain just what it feels like to feel good when you haven't felt good for a long time. And we want other people to feel good. We're in the business of helping people. I mean, you and I, and it's all intermingled.
Yeah. Man, you actually hit it right on the head. I think that was a great message, Shelley. It really was. And I think a lot of women can benefit from hearing that, because I think, unfortunately, they get a little lost in their day to day, and they're just assuming that this is how the rest of their life is going to be. We talked about that a little bit before we started talking, and you're tired, kids are going crazy, the house is dirty, you maybe have, like you said, the extra body fat you didn't have before, so you're not feeling comfortable. There's just a lot going on there. And I think even just having the peace of mind of just simple blood work can at least give you an idea of what direction potentially you need to go with some of that stuff, as far as your nutrition or sleep or even your hormones. All that comes into play.
Yeah, yep.
Well, I appreciate you so much for jumping on, Shelley. You did a great job. It's so good to have a woman's perspective on some of this stuff. I know that there is stigma around it, but I think you're a true testament to the benefits of what this stuff can bring, and the lifelong journey that you continue to live. I'm excited to hear more about all the things you're able to do and accomplish in your realm. And once again, we appreciate you coming on with us today.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. I'm just happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.